The American Arcade, a fast-paced environment full of flashing lights, vivid noises, and fond memories. Contrary to modern notions that this electronic wonderland inhabited by teenagers and inexpensive plush toys was created in the 1980s, this American tradition can be traced back to the start of the 20th century. Originally just a side tent which accompanied a fair or circus, arcades were often called midways. The phrase was coined following the 1893 World Fair in Chicago, the first World Fair to feature a designated area for amusements. First popular arcade games strongly resembled those that you might see at a modern-day beach boardwalk. Shooting galleries, ball toss games, and early versions of coin-operated machines are just a few of the activities that midways were able to offer. Some of the earliest coin-operated or penny arcade devices would tell a person their fortune or play mechanical music. One of the most popular original coin-operated arcade games was called Bagatelles, which closely resembled billiards and is considered the predecessor to modern-day pinball. It was also around this time that another early version of a still popular game, skee-ball, was created. When skee-ball alleys first debuted in 1914, they still had a few flaws. For example, the lanes were 36 feet long. Not only was this too large for most midways to store, it also made the game much more difficult and thus limited the audience who could play it. After a few revisions, such as shortening the lane to a more comfortable 12 feet, skee-ball became increasingly common in arcades across America. Around the 1920s, famous amusement parks such as Coney Island in New York provided a more refined approach towards arcades. For the first time, arcades began to be recognized as a stable, money-making scheme. In turn, this provided the atmosphere and inspiration of the more modern arcade. As technological advancements were made, the tradition embraced innovation with open arms. In the 1930s, the first recognizable pinball machine was created. These devices were made of wood, lacked plungers or flashing lights, and used mechanical scoring readouts. While the modern pinball machine looks very different to its ancestor, the use of scoring devices was one of the most important additions. For the first time, an individual could directly compete against the scores of another, and thus the experience became increasingly interactive. Although arcades originally started off with coin-operated machines, during the 1950s, these devices were generally replaced by more modern games of chance and skill. At this time, skee-ball became one of the more popular games. Redemption games also became more prominent during this era. A redemption game is an arcade game where a player is rewarded proportionally to their score, typically with tickets that can be exchanged for other prizes. Interestingly enough, due to the nature of these games, they were met with some resistance. Because players would receive prizes, these games were technically considered a form of gambling. In some parts of the country, games such as skee-ball were banned. Luckily, these laws did not last long, and the tradition was able to survive. The simplistic American tradition of arcades was forever changed when video games were introduced into amusement arcades during the late 1970s. The 1978 game, Space Invaders, is dubbed the first blockbuster arcade game. It sparked a new reformation in the classical arcades, with the introduction of new titles such as Pac-Man, Defender, and Donkey Kong. Video arcades began to spring up in shopping malls, movie theaters, bars, restaurants, and even spawned the invention of smaller corner store arcades. This is considered by many to be the golden age of arcade video games. By 1981, the video arcade industry was worth $8 billion. While most arcades began to focus on adolescents and young adults, others branched off to create child-friendly restaurant arcades. One of the most well-known and most successful is Chuck E. Cheese, founded in 1977. This pizzeria and child arcade now has more than 550 restaurants. By focusing on a younger audience, Chuck E. Cheese has forever embedded the idea of the American arcade in the minds of millions of children. While advances in technology originally revamped the American arcade tradition, in the 1990s, home video game consoles began to rival arcade games, and as a result, many video arcades began to close. Following the pinnacle of its 100-year history, the arcade began to face the threat of extinction.
But fret not, for today's arcades have been able to succeed by combining older games such as pinball and skeetball, and redemption games, along with more modern games that use special controllers that are largely inaccessible to at-home users. Examples are rhythm games such as Dance Dance Revolution, and shooter games such as Time Crisis and House of the Dead. The modern arcade is now a more socially oriented hangout, with games that focus more on an individual's skill and performance rather than the game's content. Also, due to the cheap cost of foreign-made goods, prizes are now more exciting than ever. Over the course of its existence, the arcade has made the transition from basic coin-driven machines to physical tests of skill, and now it has merged the two to create a new chapter in this American tradition.